Hey everyone, it's Vendor98 and my guest.
Jillian?
Yep. It is 2 days after the election. Of course, we were planning to do this a while before that, but it's also it's a it's a good time to do this too. Anyways, I'm doing this because about 2 years ago when we did this episode on the podcast, one my voice was very soft for some reason, and probably had mic issues or the way I was started recording through Restream. My mic was low there, so stuff happened there. And two, I don't know if we went into details for some subjects, and plus, the stuff we were talking about was very small print, so you phone watchers might not be able to read them. So this is our redo of it. Hopefully you enjoy. All right,
Though I
so
will be that person and say that I personally have a pocket constitution that I got from the ACLU.
yeah, Jillian's voice in the last episode was clear as days. You all could hear her. I guess was just a good thing because she's the main brain here. But all right, Constitution. We talked about this a little bit on our articles, the Articles of Confederation episode. But why do we need Constitution for?
Because the Articles of Confederation were terrible. Because it turned out you could not run a country on them. The Articles of Confederation were basically put into place after the Declaration of Independence in the Revolutionary War era, when we were trying to somehow be 13 countries but also one country. And that's been, as is evident, the big struggle of our country for, nearly 250 years now, is, are we one country or are we a bunch of little countries? And the Articles of Confederation really made it 13 separate countries that were, 13 countries in a trench coat, basically.
Yeah, and you think it's hard to get things done with two parties that fight that are polar opposites and politically fighting all the time. Imagine those 13 different opinions trying to agree
Yeah.
to anything.
And each state had an exactly equal vote regardless of size and population, and communication was a lot slower then than it is now, and travel was a lot slower, so people didn't leave their hometown very much less their state. I mean, I would imagine if you were from Rhode Island, you were more likely to leave your state than if you were from, New York or Georgia. But even there, people didn't really travel much, so you didn't have as much of a feel for the needs of other places. So you get this huge conflict, and nothing ever got done, and the country literally had no way of raising money. They were basically dependent on donations. It's like all 13 states were paying into the Patreon of the state government, and if their Patreon didn't clear, oh well. And nobody's Patreon ever cleared because nobody ever wanted to give money.
And also, unlike today where you need a simple 51% or a 2/3, you needed all 13 to agree.
Yeah, you needed unanimity in a way that was just not possible. And, speaking of Rhode Island, they really like to throw their weight around because they're so small. They liked to veto things because they could, because then people had to listen to them. It was not a good system. And technically, the Constitutional Convention did not have the authority to write a constitution. they were supposed to reform the Articles of Confederation. But the Articles of Confederation were so inherently broken that they just threw them out and started over.
And nothing from them was kept over from to the new thing. It's
basically not. No, there's some trade stuff and how the stuff between the state borders was going to work, but almost everything in the Constitution was new to the Constitution and had not been in the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah, I heard people today call it. It's called like federalism. Was that a new thing?
Yeah, federalism was the idea that there should be a government that controlled the country and that it should have power. And I'm sure there were Federalists before. From what I know of Alexander Hamilton, he was a Federalist before there was a word Federalist. He actually thought they should throw out state boundaries, that there was no need for them. But mostly, people thought of themselves as citizens of their state. And just to be clear, that doesn't change with the Constitution. Arguably, that changes with the Civil War, which we'll get to when we get there. But the idea of the United States of America as a country really only starts under the Constitution. Would have been nice if we could have changed the name while we were at it, but what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing that sounds like federalism is the old term of feudalism. They're totally different things.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything else you want to say about this particular intro topic?
It's worth noting that most of what we know about what happened at the convention comes because James Monroe kept a diary.
Would that be the federal? Sorry.
Huh?
I said, would that be the Federalist Papers?
No, he actually kept a diary, at the time, while the Constitutional Convention was happening, he wrote down a journal at night of what had happened that day. And they didn't keep minutes because they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. So they didn't want anyone to know what happened in case it leaked and people found out. But Monroe kept a diary, and that tells us, assuming Monroe to be a reliable narrator, which is not 100% a reliable assumption, but that's what we know of what happened, is what he said happened from day to day.
One last thing: how they agreed to get everyone together to even quote pretend to amend this?
Well, everybody knew it was broken. Even Rhode Island really knew it was broken. So there was a Continental Congress that started even before the Articles of Confederation. That's who passed the Declaration of Independence. And so it was decided in the Continental Congress that they should do this. And each state sent their delegates. I believe there was one state that didn't send any delegates. And I will look that up just real quick. But they sent their delegates, and they all got together in a room and argued a lot. And help if I could spell. Constitutional Convention. So they sent their delegates, and the delegates got together and talked things over, and okay, Okay, New Hampshire didn't send anyone until more than halfway through. It took literally like about a week and a half before 7 states delegates arrived and they could get started. Okay, Rhode Island refused to send delegates. It's Rhode Island again. And they did not actually ratify. They were the last state to ratify the Constitution.
And they had no opinion on it whatsoever.
Well, they liked the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation gave them more power. And any other system would make them lose power. And this is going to be a running thing as we go through the Constitution, is all of the states wanted to maintain as much control over their own state as they could. They didn't want to be a country. They wanted their state to be the ultimate authority. So when we get to the compromises, and there are lots of them, it's because of this need to keep state authority over state matters.
Yeah. Did you ever see the extra history thing about the Articles of Confederation?
Yeah.
It's like they talked about how the old people in the first part of the revolutions liked the Articles, but the people that are fighting in the war and stuff, the younger people are like, "This ain't working, man."
Yeah, one of the main drivers of the Constitution was Alexander Hamilton, and he was actually George Washington's aide during the Revolution. And a lot of the signers of the Declaration were just off doing other things at the time. Jefferson was in Paris. The only person, I believe, who signed both was Ben Franklin, who was also the oldest to sign both. He was the oldest person to sign the Declaration. He was the oldest person to sign the Constitution.
So he'd been around for a while. All right, so I think that's all for the intro. We're going to deep dive later. All right. We'll see you in the next part.
Mm-hmm.